Oops. Video here. Morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so I wait for people to jump on here. I'm just going to quick introduce myself so everyone knows when they jump on the replay. If you're joining us on the replay, do a hashtag replay so we know that you're here. My name is Wendy Babcock. I am a communication strategist, TEDx speaker, and author. And Her Laundry Unfolded is featuring women who have gone through some sort of challenge or hurdle in their lives and have found success, however that looks for them. Of course, depending on what challenge you've gone through, your success, you can only weigh that yourself, what that success looks like to you. So today I have Sarah Michelle with us, and I'm very excited to have her on the show. I'm going to give her information here. So if you want to contact Sarah, there's her website, successfulish.com. So thanks so much for joining me this morning, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you're adjusting well to this working from home thing?
I actually feel like I'm kind of a quarantine pro because I've been working from home for the last couple years and I live sort of in the country. And so I feel like I've been preparing for this for the last couple years. And now this is the finale.
So you can be the guiding light for everybody else. Like, okay, guys, this is how you do it.
Yeah, right? It's kind of exciting. I've been hearing from other people and I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I remember how hard it was to start working from home and to not have people around and to not have an office. And now I get to share everything that I've struggled through for the last couple years.
That's awesome. So let me turn this on here real quick. Use StreamYard. It's a whole program. I don't know if I can add it or not. Doesn't matter.
The audio is really breaking up on my end. I'm not able to hear you if you're frozen.
Hold on, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. My internet's cutting out.
No worries. I can see movement again. I can hear you. That's a good sign.
Oh, good. Okay. So I'm going to let you jump in then and go ahead and start with, what you've gone through and just kind of tell us your story and where you're at now.
Sure. So I will do my best to keep my life in a nutshell. But I think for me, it really started about 4 or 5 years ago. I had worked in the corporate life. My background is in advertising and marketing. And so I had worked in the ad agency setting. I'd worked in internal marketing. And somewhere around 4 or 5 years ago, I decided that I was ready to take a step off the corporate ladder and focus on family planning. And so I quit my job in Boston. I embraced the stay-at-home life, and I decided to create this fun little hobby business just to keep my brain engaged while I was planning on changing diapers, so I didn't go crazy. And I started this little hobby. My business was called Honey Map, and my intention was just to help small business owners and give basically free or super cheap marketing advice and just help them with marketing and do some stuff for fun. And so my husband at the time, we decided that we were going to pursue an adoption, something I'd always wanted to do. And I was going to spend a year sort of figuring out my business. And then I was going to downsize it and prepare myself to be a stay-at-home mom. And so the first part of that plan went really well. I had a ton of fun creating a business with zero pressure of bringing in any income because it was just a hobby. It was just something I enjoyed doing. And in the final phase of our adoption, I had scaled down to one client. I had baby clothes in the closet, and my husband very abruptly and unexpectedly realized he wasn't ready to be a father, and soon after realized he wasn't ready to be a husband. And I sort of went through this panic phase of watching my life fall apart and not really knowing why. He didn't really have a reason. He sort of was just going through a lot and didn't know how to, he didn't have the tools to be able to express what he was feeling or what he needed. And ultimately, over time, he ended up leaving me with nothing but an overdrawn bank account and my little hobby business. And so I went from, I'm about to be a stay-at-home mom with my husband bringing in all the income, to holy, whatever words you want to use.
Right.
I am bringing in $500 a month. I have nowhere to live. I don't have a way of taking care of myself. And it was right during the holiday season, so no corporate jobs were really hiring. And so I sort of had to become a real business really quickly. Wow. And I ended up I took a part-time job at a gym. I was making $12 an hour, basically just telling people to get on a treadmill. But I was so desperate for the extra income, and I was doing everything I could to look for jobs to apply for, but also try to grow my business. And I just felt like a failure. I felt like everyone else around me had it all figured out, and I couldn't figure anything out. I felt like I was drowning. I had no idea how to run a business. I've never owned a business before. I don't know how to set up a business model or how to do anything beyond branding and marketing. But I had to. And in the process of kind of figuring that out, I think it forced me to look at my personal identity through the lens of brand identity. And I started talking to more and more business owners and realizing, oh, actually, no one has it figured out. Right. Everybody feels like they're drowning. Everybody is struggling. And even the most successful businesses went through a lot of years of floundering. And I remember the gym manager at the time, I had done a couple really small things. I was in a local publication, and, I was slowly getting clients, and he said something one day about how he really wished that he could be like me. It was so cool that I was such an amazing CEO with such a successful business.
Right.
And I just remember looking at him like, dude, I'm wearing an orange uniform polo shirt. I make $12 an hour telling people to jump on a treadmill. Like, I'm sleeping on a cot in someone else's condo. Like,
wow.
Nothing about me even whispers success. And they started listing off all these things they admired. And I thought, I guess I am kind of successful-ish. Like, I'm taking to get there. And that's really what changed for me. So I started really thinking of myself of, okay, instead of thinking of myself as a failure, I'm going to think of myself as a CEO who's learning as I go. Just like every other great leader in the history of CEOs. And that mindset mentality changed everything, because it shifted from being a victim to sort of being, becoming the guide for other people and looking at, someday I'm going to be able to tell my story, and I'm going to be able to say, look at all these things that happened, and this is how I was able to keep moving forward and keep finding success. And so my business, Honey Map, has grown and changed and scaled and become a whole new thing since that point. I decided that successful-ish was such a great phrase that it's now becoming its own brand. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell, was just figuring out the process of the mindset of really learning how to see myself as a business leader and recognizing that failure doesn't keep you from success. It's what gets you to success, and learning how to redefine that for myself.
Right. And it's fascinating too, kind of starting at that ground zero and unexpectedly starting at ground zero and finding that momentum to get to where you're at now. So you probably had to go through a lot of like mindset shifts in that process. I can only imagine going from a hobby mindset to this needs to be my full-time income. So do you want to talk just a little bit about like some of the hurdles maybe you faced in that time, like those mindset shifts you might have had?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big ones was learning to be okay with grief. And I really had to shift my mindset and allow myself to give myself grace, and to realize, like, you know what? I went through a lot. That was a really crappy thing that happened. And instead of beating myself up, it was okay if my biggest accomplishment of the day was just putting on pants.
Right. Exactly.
Like some days that was an accomplishment. Like, I'm just going to put on pants.
Yeah.
I'm going to get out of bed today.
Yeah.
And that was a big mindset shift of, you can be optimistic, you can make the lemonade out of the lemons, but it's also okay to have a minute of being like, man, I really didn't want a bucket of lemons. This really sucks. And now I got to figure out how to convert this. And I think the other big thing with my mindset was learning how to reframe disqualifiers. I realized that I had all kinds of really silly disqualifiers and, things like, well, I can't be a real business because I have a roommate, or I can't be a real CEO because I've never been one before. Okay. Or I'm not a real business because I don't have an office, or, I don't wear suits. And right. I had all these beliefs that I thought disqualified me from having those titles. And then I learned a big mindset reframe was to be able to talk back to that voice of imposter syndrome. And instead of just trying to dismiss it, which never works because our subconscious is like, girl, who are you kidding? Like, I know you don't actually believe that. Learning how to talk back to it logically. And when that voice told me, well, you can't be a real business, or you're not a real CEO, asking who says, like, what makes a real business or a real CEO? And the answer to that is, if your name is on the LLC, you own business.
Right.
And if you're the person making the decisions for that business, you are the CEO. That's absolutely by definition, you can't get around that. And so there might be certain things that I want to work on to be a better CEO or a more successful business, but I am absolutely a real CEO and a real business. And learning how to hear those disqualifying thoughts as soon as they come into my subconscious and really hold them and look at them before I let them penetrate, and to be able to say, hey, let's make sure that this is true. Let's make sure this is valid. And if it doesn't serve me and I can't reframe it or put a yet at the end to make it a goal, this has no place in my life. And the more that I practiced that, the more natural it became. And the more I started looking for evidence that supported my success rather than looking for evidence that supported my failure.
That's huge what you're saying. I think anyone who's started a business or is in business, even if they're successful, that imposter syndrome, I think that's the demise of most of the mindsets out there. And so you working through that, I mean, to me, that's huge. When you think about, what you just said about, it's almost like baby steps, like talking to yourself and recreating that mindset. That's really huge. And I mean, that's awesome that you've been able to do that. And I'm assuming in your business now, you walk people through that process.
I do. I see myself at all steps when I work with other clients. And I think that was really healing as well, because I think a lot of times when we have that imposter syndrome, we sort of lie to ourselves and tell ourselves that we're the only person that feels that way.
Yep.
And that's just silliness. Everyone feels that way. And the interesting thing about, if you look into the research of imposter syndrome, you would think that the antidote to it would be in finding greater success or achievement. But the research actually shows the opposite, that the more success and achievement we have in life, the more imposter syndrome we have. And so some of the most successful people, Maya Angelou was one who really wrestled with imposter syndrome, and it got worse the more published she became. And so being able to know that and to recognize, like, this is not a unique thing. We don't have to be dramatic about it and let this voice win. This is just something that happens. And we just need to talk back to it like an annoying friend and just kind of have a rational conversation and change the dialogue that's happening.
That is awesome insight. And you're absolutely right, because the more you do, the more success you have, the more you question, like, well, who do I think I am? I've written 2 books. I still don't consider myself an author. I say that I'm an author, but it doesn't feel like I'm an author. So I have to have that conversation, like, okay, you did write a book. You're technically, you are an author, but it's just a weird mindset thing where you have to talk yourself into that.
Well, and I think you're very dramatic. I think we tend to be an all or none mentality.
Yes.
And I think that's a lot of it, is that we view it like success and failure are on opposite ends. Yeah. And so we're either succeeding or we're failing. And that's just not accurate. We kind of fail our way to success. It's figuring it out. And I think that's a lot of imposter syndrome too, is that when we look at someone who has a success, there's this pressure that everything in their life is success.
Right.
And that's not accurate either. When we look at people who are really successful, we're really celebrating one success that they have. That doesn't get rid of everything else that they're working on. It doesn't get rid of all the baggage. It doesn't get rid of all the failure. And so that creates a pressure when someone is at that level of success and they're being celebrated for that one thing, because there's something inside of us that's like, well, yes, I have that one thing, but you have no idea all these 99 other things that I'm still working on, that I'm still figuring out. And so I think that kind of all or none mentality sort of tricks us into thinking that we have to be on one end or the other. And really, it's an up and down through life.
Yeah, and I've really never met somebody who is successful and says, "I've hit success. This is it. Like, this is the top." Yeah. It's an ongoing thing. Like, you're successful or successful-ish, but we're always climbing to reach more, to do more, to help more people. And so that success to one person, like, oh wow, she did this. But yet they don't know that you're still in your mind in the middle of your story of what success looks like to you, because you have all these things on the books you want to, accomplish still, or people you want to reach or help. So when you start working with a new client, are you helping them build a business? Or explain a little bit more about, how you help your clients.
Yeah, so I primarily work with clients as a brand consultant. And so Honey Map is still my primary way of connecting with different businesses, but I really work in a comprehensive way. So I work with business leaders, either someone who owns a business or someone who's in a leadership role of their business, and really connecting all of the pieces that make them a business. And so it's the brand identity that starts with who they are and their beliefs and their values, and then leads into, okay, how does that translate to the internal structure of your business? How does that translate to your different marketing channels? What marketing strategy makes sense? And is it actually in alignment with what you're doing? And when I first started working with businesses who would come to me for marketing or come to me for social media strategy, I started realizing that was really not the solution to the problem. You can't outmarket an internal issue. And I would trace things back and realize, it's not really about needing a different social media strategy or a different visual brand. Like, there's some issues with how the company is structured, or there's, maybe the issue is that there needs to be staff meetings. Maybe the issue is that you're going after the wrong audience, or they're not understanding the messaging. And so I sort of look at it holistically of where is it that you actually want to go? And then what needs to happen to get you there, whether it's internal or external.
That's really good insight, because a lot of people think, oh, you just need to do, have your brand, do your marketing, and boom, you're going to be successful. When there's all these other little pieces in between, like you said, and making sure it aligns with their business model and where they want to go. And when I first started in business, I did hire somebody to help me with branding. And I had no idea what all went into that, coming up with your avatar, your perfect client, essentially. And it took me a little bit to wrap my mind around that. And so to have someone like you then guide people, to me, that's huge. Until you start getting into your own business or running a company, that stuff is invaluable. If you can have someone like you that walks you through that, that's huge.
Yeah. And I think what I love about branding is that it's a continuation of who you are as the owner of your brand. And so often when people think about branding, they think about hiring an agency to create a brand for them. And you can create a beautiful brand and a beautiful marketing strategy. But if it's not actually in line with who you are, you're going to be building something that is not really yours to build, if that makes sense. And so I think even in my own business of realizing that, when I kind of thought, oh, well, I need to look like an ad agency because that's the model, that's what I know how to do. And I created a model and a brand that was for that, but it was still disconnected. And when I gave myself permission to sort of throw that out the window and really think about, well, what is it that is actually my message? Where does my life intersect with my personal experience, my professional experience, and how I can serve people? that's really what created a healthy brand. And I think that's the beautiful thing about businesses. I love Life is Good is such a good example of that, of their mission to spread optimism, which has nothing to do with selling t-shirts, but
Right.
everything they do is connected to that message. And they're very intentional about honoring that message. And that goes through everything from how they hire, the types of media releases they do, the types of t-shirts they create. So that consistency is really important. And that's ultimately what makes people very successful in their brand.
And I think too, when you talked a bit about imposter syndrome, if that brand and who you are don't align, I think that creates that bigger gap for the imposter syndrome, because now you're trying to live up to this thing that you've built that truly isn't who you are, you know?
Yeah. And it's something that you can't always put your finger on it, but you can sense it.
Right.
It's like something that you can feel. And as yourself, as a business owner, I think it creates a disconnect because you're trying to manufacture something rather than just let it flow out. And I think as an audience too, there's something in us that looks at a business and says, you tell me that you're selling this, but I see you selling that. And it sort of creates this discomfort. And if you think about even like relationships, we all have had relationships with people who aren't necessarily super self-aware, and they tell us one thing about who they are and the reality of life, but then we see something different, and it creates a very unsafe, unstable situation that we sort of just want to stay away from because we don't know what to expect. And so as a business, I think that's one of the best gifts that you can give your client is them knowing that what I see is what I'm going to get. There's a transparency, there's an authenticity. I can be completely confident in what I'm purchasing or what I'm engaging in.
Right. And there's always an element of, like you pinpointed, like authenticity, being exactly who you are, because that's how you're going to also attract your ideal client. They're going to be attracted to you.
Right.
And I'm always in the mindset where I don't really believe in competition, because two people could sell the same exact, let's use makeup, products. People might love the product, but they're coming to you for there's something that you have in your personality, who you are, that attracts that client. And I think if people aren't true to who they are and authentic with their clients, that's that disconnect then. And they're going to be, well, I don't think this is a good fit.
Right. And that it also allows for more competition when you're trying to manufacture something, because the only thing that can't be replicated is you.
Right.
And so really someone else could start another business tomorrow and call it Honey Trails or Roadmaps or, anything that's similar to mine. They could do the exact same process, but they can't be me. Right. No matter how much they replicate, no matter how much they imitate, nobody can create my business because it's mine. Right. And so the more that we can lean into what makes us unique and that those differentiators, and even beyond just yourself as a business owner, but if you have employees, what are the unique personalities and life stories of the people in your office? Do you know that about them? And how can you use that? Because all of those little things, that's what's creating a unique entity. And that's your differentiator that nobody will ever be able to compete with.
Oh, that's so true. I never really thought about bringing in all that as a whole. That's really smart. And I think that's kind of how I came up with this Her Laundry Unfolded, is I kept thinking about the people I routinely talk to are people who have overcome these huge hurdles, and so it started to resonate with me. Like, I'm attracting people into my life who have overcome big things and, have a story to tell. So in a business, I totally see where that would, help with your business model and what you put out there to your clients. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I love that Her Laundry Unfolded, because we all have dirty laundry. We all have things that we've overcome in the past. We all have things that we will overcome in the future. It's all there. We all have it. And so just being able to make that a part of humanity, we certainly have professional expertise that comes from what we do professionally, but most of our expertise comes from personal experience. There's no better teacher than life and going through difficult situations and going through crisis situations. That's really what shapes us and grows us and gives us that perspective and that leadership to be able to lead other people and to say, hey, I know that this is really hard, but I've actually gone through this before. Let me tell you how I went through it. And then we can give people the freedom to go through it the way that they need to. But I think that's the beautiful thing about storytelling, is that we get to see ourselves. It's not about the person telling the story being the hero. It's about being able to see ourselves in someone else's story and to be inspired and see, oh, here's new opportunities. Here's new vantage points that I wasn't able to see because I was so close to the situation. And I think that that is just such a beautiful piece of sharing our stories with each other.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Is we always search for a piece of ourselves in other people. And so like for you to come on and tell your story, there's somebody who's going to listen to this and say, I've always wanted to start this business, but I'm afraid, or I just don't think I have the tools, or I don't know how. So what kind of advice would you give somebody who's watching this, who's maybe in that boat where they just maybe gotten through some life challenge and they're like, I know I need to go in this sort of direction. How do I start? What would you advise for someone like that?
I think the best advice I would give someone is to take themselves on a date and really spend some time with themselves.
Okay.
And if you think about, like, if you're on a good date, someone asks you a lot of questions about yourself and your life and your goals and what you want and what makes you you. And that would be my advice, to do that for yourself, to really take some time, because for most of us, we've never been given that permission or that opportunity. And I think that makes the biggest difference, just to sit down and really honestly ask ourselves, what do I want? What am I passionate about? What gets me excited? What do I want to do? And then from there, you can start mapping out, okay, now how am I going to get there? But if we don't know what we're working towards or why we're qualified to work towards it, it's just always going to feel like we're spinning. Right. And I think especially as women, I think a lot of us have been conditioned to think that that's selfish, that we need to take care of other people, that it's immature or not okay to focus on what we want.
Right.
But I think that learning how to trust our gut and that inner wisdom is ultimately what is going to lead us. And the more that we're able to pursue that, the more we're able to inspire and take care of other people in a healthier way. So I think that starting, it's like putting on your oxygen mask first.
Right.
So that would be my biggest advice. Just take a you date and, pour a cup of coffee, glass of wine, and really get to know yourself.
I love that analogy, because I think about when you take yourself on a date, if you're with somebody else, you're putting your best foot forward. You're thinking about your good qualities. You're not in the I am not mindset. You're in the I am. This is what I want. You're more in that positive mindset of looking at your best qualities to put forward. So I absolutely love that. I've never heard anyone say that before, but that's such a great way to look at it, to really put your best self forward, as if you were presenting yourself to another person, but just taking yourself on a date. I absolutely love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about, deciding how you want to go into your future.
Right.
Like if you're going on a date, you're asking questions because you want to know who you're walking into the future with. And we're always going to be walking in the future with ourselves. Right. We can't get away from that. And so it's just an opportunity to think, okay, what am I walking into the future with? What is a part of my past that maybe needs to be addressed or healed? What's a part of my past that needs to be reframed? What do I have in my present to be able to move forward? What do I need to move forward? And it's just breaking it down in a simpler way of really being okay with going after what we want.
Yeah, and it's a great way to address your goals and values, because if you're like in a dating situation, you need to know what their goals and values are, and if they align with yours. It's important to know your personal goals and values before you put yourself out there.
Absolutely. And that's
with business, same thing.
Yeah, and that's a big piece of success, is that for many of us, we don't actually know what yardstick we're measuring success with. I think the dictionary definition talks about fame and affluence, and those are certainly okay things, but I think for many of us, we fall into a trap of going after success by the definition of what we think it is, and then we get there and we're still unhappy. And so if we don't take time to know what success actually looks like, Maybe success isn't a huge financially successful business. Maybe success is a successful hobby that also allows you to raise babies. Maybe success is being at the top of a corporate ladder. Maybe success is being able to take summers off, or, just really loving your job. I think it's so important to think about, what yardstick are we using? What really is success for us? Because otherwise we're going to be running after the wrong goals.
Right. And if we start using that whole comparing ourselves to other people who we think are successful, I think that's where we measure success by other people that maybe we admire or like, but what their priorities are and their success could be 100% different from where we would measure up to where our success looks like. And until you really just kind of step into those shoes and start to lay those things out, I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, I think comparison should be, looking at other people and getting ideas for how we would convert that in our own life, not looking at other people and trying to put ourselves in their life.
Right.
And, it's not a bad thing to look at other people and to think, oh, I really admire her because of this, or, oh, I really like that she has this. But then we need to figure out for ourselves, okay, well, what does that look like for me? Instead of just getting jealous and comparing ourselves and being like, oh, well, they're successful and my life doesn't look like that, so obviously I'm a failure. That's, again, a really dramatic statement, and it's just not true. We're all different. Nobody can replicate someone else's success or someone else's brand or identity.
Right. And knowing when to say no when it doesn't align with your values too. I've met a few different women. A good friend of mine was actually offered like a TV show about kind of her life, and something felt off to her. And I said, you have to follow your gut. If it feels off, there's a reason why it feels off to you. And yeah, it could have brought this whole different level of success. But if it doesn't align,
right,
you can't just say yes to something because it looks like success. It has to feel like it aligns with you. So knowing when to say no in those circumstances is really important too.
Yeah, that's huge. And I see that a lot with new businesses where they sort of jump at any publicity opportunity.
Yep.
And they don't say no to any client who will give them money. And then they get stuck where they're at a place where they're ready to grow and scale, but they can't because they have all this other clientele. And so the people that they want to work with are like, oh, well, those people don't look like us, so we must not be a match. And so I think that's a really hard thing to have faith in ourselves, because when you're a new business and you're struggling and someone offers to pay you money to do work that you can do, it is really hard to say no to that.
Yes.
And to be able to think long term and to trust, you know what, I'm going to say no to this, and it's going to hurt a little bit right now, but it's so much better to be aligned with your brand and your identity, and to wait and to go after the opportunities that really will serve your big picture.
Yeah. And I've run into that a lot with friends, or I'm in different groups of women entrepreneurs who you can tell because they'll say, boy, I just got this one client that I probably should never have taken them on, and now they're this huge thorn in my side.
Yeah, they're always the worst.
Yeah.
They're always the neediest, the penny pinchingest. I don't know if that's a word, but they're always the worst. It's not worth it. It's so much better to just wait. And I think that's the importance of knowing who you are and what you're building, because that gives you a framework to know what you can and should say yes and no to.
Right. And listening to that little voice in your head when you're kind of like, oh boy, it kind of aligns, but there's just something off. I just, but I need this right now. And being able to say no, that's really, really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
So I want to know what your poster behind you says. I'm trying to read it on the screen, by the way.
It's the definition of successful-ish, which is living between successes. And it says, failure is only failure if I stop. If I keep going, it's just one step closer to figuring it out, which is ultimately success.
Oh, I love it.
And that is something that I believe wholeheartedly, and has really what has prompted that brand is it's just one step closer to figuring it out. So every time you fail at something and you learn from it and you move forward, you're one step closer to being successful. And that's absolutely something to celebrate.
Right. Oh, I love that. That's just fantastic. And I imagine, in working through the processes that you've done, it's probably healed some of those, things that you've overcome in the process. Like even the smallest success can feel like a huge success because you're like, you know what? I started here and now I'm here, even if it's not that big of a scale, it's still it's feeling.
It has given me a lot more grace for myself. I think especially as I am working with other business owners, because there's never been a time where I've diminished someone's success. Like I celebrate every step that people take, and it's made me realize how rarely I do that with myself. And, I grew up in a home that had very high standards. And I think that, my parents wanted the best for me, and I'm very appreciative of who that's made me to be. But it also sort of made me feel like if I wasn't the best of the best, it wasn't even worth acknowledging.
Right.
And I don't think that that makes sense because nobody starts off being the best of the best. You have to get there. And when I moved, I opened up a box of really old stuff from growing up, and I found, 6 or 7 high school, middle school, elementary trophies, and they were all for most improved.
Oh, wow.
And I hated that when I was a kid because I was like, that's such a lame award. That's like one step above participation. Like I want one that says I'm actually really good at this.
Right.
But I have such a different perspective on that now of like, what a testament to work ethic. And that's really the one we should be going after. And, if you think about like little kids, when they take their first steps, we don't ignore it or like yell at them and be like, oh, well, so-and-so's son ran a marathon yesterday, so I'm not impressed with your little toddle steps. Like, we celebrate it. Like, oh my God, that's a step. And then we celebrate the first time they walk across a room. And then we celebrate the first time that they run. And we celebrate as they're getting like moving further down that scale. And so I think that that's been a big learning thing of just realizing like, it's really important to see our progress. And it's okay to be focused on the goal ahead, but that doesn't get rid of all the steps that we've taken behind us. And I think that's been the importance of living in the middle. I don't ever want to feel like I've made it and there's nowhere else to go. And I don't ever want to feel like, well, why try? Because I'm not successful. Like I want to feel like I've succeeded at a lot and I get to succeed at a lot more.
I love that. And you never think about that most improved, but that's almost like the best compliment you could get is most improved. Like, wow, look where you've gone,
Yeah.
I love that. I'm thinking about start giving awards for that for adults, most improved. Like you went through this really crappy part of your life and look where you're at now. That's most improved. That's not, you don't need to be the winner,
Yeah.
And even on participation, at least you're trying. Participation award is something too, but
yeah, you showed up and that counts. There's so many people who just don't even show up. They don't even try. And so by showing up every day and dusting ourselves off and saying, today's another day. Today's another day I'm going to show up. And sometimes it goes smooth and sometimes it's really hard. And, I just want to crawl under the blankets with a bag of potato chips and a bottle of wine and throw myself a pity party. And it's okay to have those moments, but then you get up the next day and you show up again. And that's really the only thing that separates success stories and failures is that they keep showing up. And so if you're showing up every day, you're succeeding. You got it.
And I think too, I have a friend, Susie Simonson, who's an author and a speaker, and she has always, always preached to celebrate yourself every single day. Find something to celebrate. So when you ever get on a Zoom with her or, group meeting, she's like, okay, let's go through, what are you going to celebrate today? And that can be, and I've used this with my daughters too. It's like, okay, even if you just got out of bed and you didn't feel like it because you were having you got out of bed, celebrate it.
Yeah.
So I think just celebrating even those smallest things can just, mean such a huge thing in your life.
Yeah, I do something very similar. I call it the 3 3s, and I try to track every day 3 things that I'm thankful for, 3 things that I succeeded at, and 3 things that I failed at.
Oh, wow.
And that's been really helpful with the things that I'm thankful for has helped me you can literally rewire your brain by focusing on gratitude. It takes about 21 days, but it's really cool. There's cool research that you can Google, but it's a cool thing because you start to look for more things, that instead of seeing all the obstacles, you start seeing all the blessings. And then things that you've succeeded at, it's cool to be able to look back at the year and be like, wow, I've accomplished a lot. Look at all this stuff that I've succeeded at. And by being able to write down failure every day, it normalizes it. It makes it not something to be ashamed of. It takes away that feeling of that big red F that we had growing up. And it makes it, here's all the things I failed at through the year. And you start to see too, a lot of your successes are from your past failures.
Right.
So it gives you a really cool just visual to be able to see it all coming together. And I think that is really helpful in my motivation to keep going, because I now, instead of just having the evidence of my own shame spiral and voices of imposter syndrome,
Right.
I have written evidence of actually moving forward.
And I think what you're saying about failure and stuff is so important, because sometimes that propels us in a direction that we didn't see before. You could fail at something and say, oh, well, you know what? I think it's going to point me in a little bit different direction. And then you're able to look at that and say, wow, that now is a success because I learned from that failure. I need to just kind of veer this way now. So failure is so important in success.
Yeah, some of the best products and businesses have been because of failures. Post-its. The guy who invented Post-its was trying to invent a super adhesive glue, and he completely failed. But he created a kind of sort of adhesive glue, and God bless the Post-it. Like, I love Post-it, so I'm super thankful for that failure.
Yeah.
So you never know. It's you're really not failing if you're learning how to take advantage of all the opportunities.
Right. This has been very insightful. I'm so glad you came on today. I think a lot of people are going to find so many nuggets of valuable information in just, your interview for episode 2 on Her Laundry. So I'm going to wrap it up. I'd like to go about 45 minutes. So if there's anything particular you'd like to share with someone who would be looking to hire you, if you want to talk just a little bit about your process when you start to work with somebody, do you do like what do they call those? Like to explore to see if you're a good match?
I do. So I have a free consultation call. It's sort of like the first date where I ask some questions about you and your business goals and what you're working on. And I'm very honest about my philosophies about marketing and strategy to make sure it's a good fit. And then I have a couple different tailored options depending on where people are at in business. And so all of them start with a strategy call. And so that's usually a really fun half day of just talking and getting to know each other and really diving into who you really are and what your business is. And then I have an option that puts together your brand identity, which is really great for someone who is representing themselves in a business, or they're looking to speak or be a thought leader, anyone who just needs to work on that brand and languaging. And then I have another option for businesses that actually will take that and then outline a marketing strategy. And so based on who you are and who your audience is, it still has all those pieces of your mission and your vision and how to talk about yourself. And then it goes into all the different marketing options that are available and how to best strategize each of those. And then we create a roadmap so that you know exactly what your next step is and how to talk about yourself consistently in whatever platform that you choose.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a very big picture of what you do. Like, I love that. It's like you're just handing someone like the kind of the completed package. Like, here you go. Here's everything you're going to need, and then it's a great way to, I foresee it as self-discovery for a business. And I think in talking to you, it sounds like they're going to learn a lot about themselves and really clarify their message. And I've learned that that's really important too, is to have that clarity in what they want and what message they want to portray. So
yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. So if you want to connect with Sarah, go to successfulish.com. And I love that name. I love that word, successfulish. But thank you so much for being on Her Laundry Unfolded. This will be uploaded to YouTube, so people can find you on the page itself. Feel free to share it as much as you want to your following as well. And it will be uploaded to YouTube. So thank you again so much. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll be back next week Monday at 11 a.m. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Go.